So finally we get to the fourth part of your activity, and this will be the tonal bar and the small little tonal mountainscape or cityscape, where we're going to be using values of ink that represent dark to light and creates the illusion of depth. So again, your 9 by 2-inch tonal bar with 7 equal spaces. And again, take measurements from the top and the bottom on both sides to get your line straight. So if you put the ruler here, make a dash where it lands. And you're going to repeat that down here on this side, make a dash where it lands. And then you use the ruler to make a straight line. Okay? Same thing on the left and the right side. Make a dash where it lands. Move it down, make another dash where it lands, and then you use the ruler to make the straight line. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and mark off my 2 inches. I have my dash at the 2 inches, or my line stops at the 2 inches. Then I come over here and put a dash at the 2 inches, and bottom of this line and that dash will make a straight line for me. And I know I've gone through this with some of the other activities, but I think that, you know, sometimes we forget and we don't do the process correctly, therefore our bars will be skewed. And then I think I calculated about 1 1/4 or 1 1/8 for each, I'm going to 1 1/4, between 1/8 and 1/4 for each space that we are going to put in the bar. Each space that we're going to put in the bar, about 1 1/4-ish, or 1 1/8-ish, kind of in between there. And just make a dash at that point so that you end up with 7 equal spaces. Okay. And then again, if you need to do the same thing at the top, make sure you're doing the same measurements that you did at the bottom for those dashes. I, again, will eyeball my straight lines because I'm going to use this line and also the line of the edge of my paper as a gauge to keeping my ruler straight. So it's kind of simple, and once you get the hang of it, you know, sometimes you don't have to make all those dashes, but if you don't have the hang of it, you do need to make measurements so that everything is lined up squarely. So this one will be an ink study, where we're going to use just water and black ink. Now down here, I'm going to just put a space here, and I'm going to leave it at 8 inches across. I'm going to put a space which will represent my picture plane for me to draw the little mountainscape, so that we can practice and see the illusion of atmospheric perspective. So I'm going to be just doing a square, a large square down here, and it's whatever size square that you want, and I'll tell you my square size. It'll be definitely 8 across. It'll be definitely 8 across, just like the bar, and at least 7 down. This will be for my little ink wash landscape. So put your ruler and your pencil to the side, and now I have a little tray. And this is something you guys might not have, but if you can get something that has compartments in it, or get some paper cups and cut them down to a short paper cup so you can use them to make inks in different places. So each one of these places has to have an ink of a different value. We're going to do water in each one of them. And I'm going to use my water bottle. I wish I had a squirt bottle to do this with, because it'd be a whole lot easier. I'm going to put some water over here in the middle well, just to have that handy in case I need to dilute anything. Because the water-soluble ink is dilutable. We're not adding any white to this. We're just using the ink. And now also we want to identify our regions here. We're going to go from light to dark. Oops. Did I write day? So light to dark, okay? So when you do a mountainscape, of course, anything that's going into the distance is going to be light. So you'll be working from light to dark. Just a FYI, it's always best to paint from light to dark. Even if it's ink wash, if it's acrylic, it's always best to paint from light to dark. The more pigment comes toward you, comes in front, and the lighter is going to go in the distance. And you don't want to have your paintbrush full of all of the dark medium right away. So I always work from the rear, and then I'm overlaying areas of light areas that I don't want to see. So let's go ahead and grab the paintbrush. Okay, hydrate it, and you can hydrate it here. Okay, hydrate it here. If you can move water with a paintbrush to a little small well, all right, you're gonna just take a little tiny bit of ink and see what happens. You should have a test page or something somewhere so that you can test out. I'm going to grab a scrap piece of paper. You can test out the density of that mark. See, that's way too much ink in that water. So guess what? I'm going to go over here, put the paintbrush in there with a little bit of that. Oops, wrong one. I was supposed to go to the water. So I'm going to take some more water and come in here and see what I have. So you mark it and see how diluted and transparent it is. So I like that one. So this one is very transparent. So I'm going to put that one in the second one. This is the first one. I'm still going to do one in the first one that's not completely, I don't want to leave that completely white. So I'm going to go backwards and do a very thin dilution of ink in that first one. I just kind of wanted to put this one in here since I had it already ready. So now what I'm going to do is grab a bead of water from here, maybe a little bit more water. Oh, just use it all. Okay, so that one should be even lighter. Look at that. So we want to put a very light one in here, almost transparent. Now you're using your mixed media paper. Oops, it's bleeding. This is what you don't want to happen. You don't want to bleed. So you're going to have to leave a little bit of space. So water, wet on wet. The water from this side pulled this water into it. So be careful. You might have to let things dry a little bit before you go to the next step. So now I'm stuck. Not really. So now I have this little bead of water. I'm going to just save it and wash my brush off. So this one was for number 2. Because I'm going to need to go back over here and fix that. So now I'm going to do one for number 3. Put a little bit of water over here, a little bit of water over here with my brush, grab some ink. And there are percentages for all of this. I'm just not really knowledgeable on the numbers. I'm just adding more water to it so I can see what it looks like on my test page. Okay, so now I have that one. Again, try and leave a space. Oops, maybe that's a little bit too dark. So you have to make adjustments as you go along. You have to make adjustments. Here's another little trick. You can wick it off with your paintbrush if it's too much. Wick that off, clean off your brush, dry it. The brush will wick it off, meaning that it will absorb the fluid, but you have to do it right away so you don't lose this work that you're doing. Wick that off. So I'm just picking it up. Dry it off, pick it up, and then you can smooth out what's left, and it should be the next level of value up. So this is probably about 10 to 1, 10 parts water to 1 part ink. This one was probably about 1 to 15 or 15 to 1. So this one needs to be a little bit darker, and it's okay to overlap them, which does provide more value, but you have to let them dry in between in order for that to really show up for you. So I just added a little bit and it seems to be taking it. Okay, So now I'm going to go to the next one. And this batch right here was for here, over there. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of that, put it in here. So you're going to be playing with this whole idea and trying to make these values happen in each of the blocks. You don't want to make it too dark too quick. And definitely you can pull some paint off of your brush or some ink off of your brush, but just wiping it off on your blotting pad or your piece of paper, or your paper towel, whatever you're using, you can blot it off. But you want to be mindful of touching them, because if you touch them, it will drag into the next level. So that one is a tiny bit darker. And this is just an exercise to show you how you can control your levels of value with even ink wash. So now let me take another little tiny bit of ink and put it in one of my bubbles here and test it out. That's not dark enough. Test it out. Ooh, that's kind of dark. Take a little bit more water. So you're testing it out. You just keep testing it out and see if it's going to be the next level. And this one is working out perfect. And what I'm going to do is go back and fix my other ones. So this is the ink wash process, where you're just using plain old water and some water soluble ink. Okay, now I'm going to take a little bit more of my fresh ink and go over here and then test it out and see if I can get into the next space. And I can. And the last one, of course, will be pure black. It'll just be pure black. This one will be a little transparent because I have more water in it. Well, the last one won't have any water in it at all. So this one has a very small percentage of clear water mixed into it. Clean off the brush, and now I'm just going for my solid black pigment. And I know that the last two kind of almost look close together, the same. So what I'm going to do is hurry up and finish this part and go back and wick out this one here, because I think it is a little bit too dark. So I'm wicking it out by drying my brush off in between strokes, just to bring out some of that dark value that I don't want in there. So now we have a difference in the last two blocks. We have a difference. Now what I said I was going to do was go back to this one, because these two almost look the same. I need this one to be different. I want that one to stay bright. So I'm going to test it out and see what I get on my blotter, on my tester paper, because I don't want that to be too dark. I mean, each one of these little wells can help you make a new color, so you just almost have to just keep track of it. You know, it can get very, oops, too much. It can get very confusing, so make sure you know where you are in each of your, I'm going to wick that out because that's a little bit too dark. Oh, it's working out. I'm pushing it around, so it's working out now. Okay, so now I think that my second one, my third one might be a little bit too much the same as the second one. Okay, there we go. So let me go ahead and try to correct this third one, because I think it needs to be, I don't want these two to match, and they look almost like they're matching. So that means we need to go over it and be careful. Be careful. Just be testing it out on every step that you take, so that you don't accidentally put too much black or have it too thin. So test it out and make sure. Yeah, this is better. Which makes me know now that I'll have to go into the third one and make that one. And one other thing with ink, when you layer layers of ink, they get darker and darker. You just have to let one dry before the other. So this is how you can create those different tones as you go back into the distance or come forward from the distance. they need to get, you need to have more ink in your water for that to be darker and darker. And also, when you layer a wet layer of the same value on top, it's going to get darker. It is going to get darker. And this one is a little bit too dark. I'll wick it out. I want to see a little tiny bit of transparency. The water in the ink makes it transparent. And so now I'm wicking out some of it because I believe it's a little tiny bit too dark. So there we go. We have our tonal bar. It was a struggle, huh? Not really. It was pretty good. So we have a really nice tonal bar right here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to play around with creating some kind of, and you can gently sketch it in if you feel more comfortable of what it is you want to draw here on this. Oops, I'm making a mess now. I got to get some paper towels out. There we go. So if you want to draw some kind of city, mountainscape, mountainous kind of mountainscape, you just draw that in the way you envision, just some humps basically. And you're going to have overlap. Remember, overlap happens. And whatever is overlapping in front of something else will most likely be darker. So now I have a few forms here, organic forms in here, and I'm also going to do something with the background, the sky as well. So I have a few organic forms, and the way it looks is that there's some overlapping going on in here. So this one is in the rear, this one is coming forward, this one's in front, this one's in the rear, and this one's coming forward. You can put many more if you like. You can put a little bit more if you like. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to just change brushes to a smaller flat brush. And I want to put my ink right here, close by. And I'm going to start with the lightest tone that I have, just to do the sky. Okay? Just to do the sky, the lightest tone. So in atmospheric perspective, what you're seeing is that the sky is diluted with water. The sky is saturated with water, and so therefore the mountains in the background are muted and muddied because you have particles of pollution and waters in the air, and that is what creates the atmosphere to being a little bit murky in the distance. And as when you see the shapes underneath the sky, the shapes are going to look murky. You might have a really beautiful blue sky. It might look beautiful out there, perfect blue sky, but you still have those waters and murkiness, those particles of pollution and stuff in the sky. We just don't see them all until they land in front of our eye. The distance, the depth of the grunge and the fluids and the stuff in the sky would deter and reduce the quality of the visual quality of the mountains in the background. So they are all going to be a little bit murky. So let's go ahead and do another. So I'm going to start with the furthest one, and it needs to be a little murky. Okay, and you know, just kind of keep in mind what you're doing. You want to create the illusion of depth by allowing your values to change as you come forward. And some of these in the background might be the same or real close to, and that's okay. But we do want to have variations. We want to have a few variations going on. And once one of these or two of these dry, once they dry, you could always go back and add another layer. So it's always better to start light and grow your values or grow your densities in your mountain range. So this one right here came out too dark. This one's a little bit lighter. They should be reversed. So what I'm going to have to do is, and keep testing, I'm going to have to darken this one just a tiny bit. And I'm just scooting my brush around. This is just a study. This doesn't have to be a perfect. It's just a study. And as we come forward, this one might be real close to the same value as the one next to it. Except for when you get down here at the bottom, it may be a little bit closer to us. So you can darken that if you like. And usually the upper parts of the structures or the organic forms might be more gray than the bottom of the organic structures. They might be a little bit darker because the mountain's kind of like a wedge and it's coming toward us. So you can alter those. So try to have fun with this one. Try to see what you would actually see out in nature. Try to see that and see as we get closer in toward our view. This down here, you want this to be nice and rich, and as it goes up it can lighten just a tad. We need a little bit more water. This is wet on wet, and again you might experience one dragging into the other, so be careful. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of dark to this one. And once you get good and comfortable with this, this will be a piece of cake for you to do this without even having to test your brush so much. But in the beginning, test your brush. Test your brush so you know exactly what you're getting when you put that brush on paper. So this is getting very, very close to being completed. Just as a tonal study, we want to have contrast between each of these mountain forms. So provide contrast. And where things are the same, you can darken. You can put a little bit of dark somewhere just to represent a shadow down here. Just a little bit. Okay, you can darken so that it divides. And water is your friend with this. So did you see how I just kind of made that separate down here? And if the last bit of ink that you put on your page is still wet, a wet paintbrush can help you move it around. So let me do this. And this is just a study to see depth, to create the illusion of depth. You can hyper improve these as you go, just to give some more dramatic effects and more shadows next to one thing and the other. And that's what I'm doing right now. I come in here and diffuse it upwards. And a little bit over here at the base of this mountain. And diffuse it upwards. Don't be afraid of it. You could always do another one. This is just a study so that you can get the exposure of working with ink, diffusing ink, diluting ink, using it to create illusionistic forms. And let's see over here. And again, if your paint or your ink is still wet, you can keep moving it around with a wet paintbrush to diffuse it and mix it right there on the paper. So you want it to look mountainous. You want to see some depth and some distance in this piece, in this little sample. And over here, I think I'll put a little bit of dark to divide that mountain from the front mountain. That will be a shadow. This will be a shadow back here. And use a wet brush to diffuse it. Okay. And down here, oh, we need to do that one, huh? And this one's really close to us. It's going to have way more definition. It's going to have dark tones, maybe. Maybe not the whole thing should be as dark as this. So this is a start, and then we can grab some water on that brush and dilute it. And I definitely want to get to that road. Make that road come out. going to change the shape of my mountain. And so my road, what do I want to do with my road? As I go into the distance, okay, now this is kind of like a reversal thing getting ready to happen here. We need some dark tone back here because it's shadowed and shaded in between these mountains. So I'm just going to put a little bit of dark in there. And as I come out of there, I need to thin out my ink for that road to brighten. And I know it seems like it's, but this one is not changed by atmosphere. This one is changed by shadows and light and shading. So it's a little bit of the opposite of what we've been talking about in terms of atmospheric perspective. It's just the opposite. And this is a very loose sketch. Just a sketch just to get the experience and to see what happens when you dilute ink. And again, if you put two inks next to each other, they are going to mix. And I'm just giving some effects over here, some texture effects, just by scrubbing my brush in there. So now I feel okay. I feel like I see changes, variations with my mountainscape. And now there's a whole lot more that can be done with this one, but I feel like I see depth. And so now I'm going to go back in here with just some dark on my brush, just to try to create a shadow, a casted shadow next to some of my mountains here. And all of them don't have to have a shadow because some of them are so far away you're not going to even see the shadow. But these ones right here are close. So I'm just going to put a shadow of the mountain in front of it, right on that one. And same thing over here. I just want to put a shadow. And a shadow is an irregular, it kind of matches the mountain. It doesn't, it's not just a line. You want to create the shape of the mountain as the casted part. If you ever look at yourself walking down the street, that's what you'll see. You'll see a duplicate of yourself in the shadow walking down the street. So you want to duplicate the shadow. So I think that was pretty good so far. I mean, it's a real quick study just to get sorry about that, just to get an idea of how you use diluted ink to create light and dark, and also to create atmospheric perspective in your work. And I know I keep messing with it, but I'm a perfectionist and I like for stuff to look really good. So that would be a tonal study in ink with the distant part of your composition being brighter as you go in the distance, okay, by diluting your ink with some water. So hopefully this helps with that next activity, and I'll see you in the next one.